My name is Aroona Bhat, and I'm fashionably recognized and popularly known by a name, almost a term of endearment now, Funky Bindi Queen. Strange as it may seem, it didn't really start that way. My sister and I are byproducts of a marriage between two people, both of whom belong to highly conservative Brahmin families. And considering they were working professionals, it was amazing that they upheld all their conservative values. Chief among them was the importance of that little black dot in the center of the forehead. And black was the color because we were still really tiny and therefore unmarried. Our older girl cousins had actually graduated to the color red as and when they got married. So as little kids, this is how we looked. That's my sister and me with a dot on the forehead. Wherever we went for our little holidays, we had to go with that bindi stuck there on the forehead. And that was me as a kid, don't miss the dot. And my mother clearly seemed to have a strong intuition of what was going to happen to that forehead space in the years to come. So you can see the size of the dot in that picture as well. As we grew older and we felt that we were a little more in control of our lives and a few decisions we could make for ourselves, my sister and I decided to not wear that little black dot. Little did we know that our very existence would be belittled for that act of defiance. I remember the taunts my sister and I had to listen to. Worse still, our mother had to endure, and she was told, you don't know how to bring up your daughters with the right values. She was taunted, she was said very unfair things, and she was said, how can you allow your girls to walk around with a look befitting a widow, as a bare forehead look was ungraciously referred to. Widows, unfortunately, to this day have to walk around, sporting bare minimums in monochromes, and that, is in existence in many parts of our country. So to save our mother, all the unsavory comments and the taunts and the ordeal, my sister and I decided to walk around everywhere with that little black dot on the forehead. My sister, being the good older child, would listen to whatever our elders had told her and would wear that little dot dutifully. But me, being the second sibling and therefore slightly defiant, I decided to make it very, very known that I didn't approve of it in the least, and that I found it absolutely and utterly uncool. So what I started doing is, moments before we had to meet with relatives, I would quickly slap on a sticker bindi on my forehead. And as soon as we were done meeting with them, I'd peel it off as well, till I got caught by the family elders on more occasions than one, and I was told, hello, use that little black kajal. So the sticker bindis were very easy to deal with, but that sticky black kajal was a messy, smudgy affair. That is exactly what gave rise to all the experimentation that I started with. So the black kajal had what I called country cousins, the color red and the color white. So I started using them in tandem. So I would normally draw a black dot in the middle and draw a couple of lines over it, above it, under it, all kinds of experimentation, like in this picture. And where it's just the black color that I've used. Or sometimes I would use just the country cousins and I would make a tiny little bindi. And mind you, they were all tiny because the minute it got a little large, the last thing we wanted was our mother to go through some more grief than she already was going through. In 1997, I moved to Bombay. And the girl with the dot on the forehead seemed to be given a new lease of life. That forehead space seemed to transform itself. My forehead became my canvas. Bindis started to climb towards the sky and cover the expanse of my forehead. And they got very colorful because I discovered, a box of color. I started experimenting with other things as well, like holy ash, vibhuti, which was freely available in all temples in Bombay, particularly the Sai Baba temples. And I would use lipstick, I've used eyeliner, I've used anything I could think of. There was one time when I used the sticky part of a Band-Aid and stuck that on my forehead and drew lines around it. So in Bombay, nobody really seemed to mind the kind of designs I had on my forehead or what I did with it. So I walked around sometimes with a wine glass that I chose to draw on my forehead. I would lift a pretty little bit of a pattern on the sari and make that into a bindi. And here I am where my pendant became my own muse, and I had drawn a bit of the pendant on the forehead, and experimenting and letting people know that an eyeliner can make a fantastic bindi as well. So while I was a happy little shining star in Bombay, when I came back home here to Mangalore, things were exactly where I left them last. So I still remember the unsavory comments, the rude things that people would say, etc., etc. And I remember one particular incident very, very clearly. So I had drawn a horizontal eye on my forehead, and I had put tiny little red flowers on the inside, made it look quite pretty. And a friend's uncle actually walked up to me and said, "Have you drawn your vagina on your forehead?" I was deeply humiliated and extremely shocked by that reaction, and it's only because my sister and my cousin were with me that day. They were the ones who actually got me out of there without saying a word. When I went back home and I thought about it, I realized I was brave enough to be me. And there was something clearly different about me. And think about it. It's a point for all of us to think about. We don't really know what to do with people who are different. The best reaction that comes out of us is to laugh. That's what we do to people who are different. The horizontal eye is still one of my favorite basic designs. I still do it quite often and, of course, do some intricate stuff around it. And believe you me, I'm most tempted every time I draw a horizontal eye to take a picture and send it to that uncle and say, "I'm still drawing vaginas on my forehead." So what happened after that? A chance encounter with the editor of the Limca Book of Records opened doors I never, ever imagined would happen to me. So she walked up to me and said, "What's that on your forehead?" I said, "It's my expression of a bindi." She said, "How long do you take to do it?" I said, "Within a minute." She double-checked. She said, "You draw it yourself?" I said, "Yes, I do." She said, "Do you realize you can qualify in the record books?" I said, "Oh, wow." And I actually got into the Limca Book of Records. The day I got into the Limca Book of Records, I actually laughed till I cried. My big, funky bindis, the very thing that was utter taboo within my own family, within our relatives, with people we knew back home in Mangalore, was the very thing that was going to become my identity, and I was very soon going to also find my extraordinary in that process. With the advent of the easily accessible internet, I started doing a lot of research on the bindi, on its connection with the Ajna Chakra, with the third eye, the seat of consciousness where the bindi rests, the Ajna Chakra and its command over the other glands of the body, like the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, the endocrine gland. And I was amazed that the bindi could actually charge the Ajna Chakra into functioning even better. You will be amazed to note that we in India are the only ones who actually believe that the Ajna Chakra can be manually triggered by the application of the bindi. This leads me to a very interesting conversation that I had with a psychic and a healer, Ashmita Goel. Ashmita wanted to test the effectiveness of wearing the bindi using different forms like vibhuti or holy ash, sandalwood paste, liquid bindi, and a sticker bindi. So through the method, using a pendulum and the method of dowsing, they wanted to infer the effectiveness of this on the Ajna Chakra. You will not believe me when I tell you what she told me. She says after application of the vibhuti first and the sandalwood paste after that, the pendulum swung like there was no tomorrow. With the liquid bindi, the kind that I use, the effectiveness was slightly less. And with the sticker bindi, it had come down to about 20%. What it goes to show is that the Ajna Chakra gets charged immaterial of what you use, whatever the form you may use. That's the interesting thing that came out of this whole thing. And this leads me to another point. You might ask, what exactly is it that the Ajna Chakra and the bindi have to do with one another? The act of applying the bindi on the Ajna Chakra charges the chakra and seals the energy inside the Ajna chakra, and because the Ajna chakra commands all the other chakras of the body, that is exactly what helps us perform throughout the day. And voila, I seem to have found the reason for my extraordinary confidence. The information that I'm sharing with you is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that's available on the internet, and I truly, truly don't want to bother or bore any of you with stuff that's available on the internet. Coming back to me, I never step out of the house without drawing a bindi on the forehead. And when I think back about all the information that we have learned, and I had learned through the process of the internet, etc., I realized that had this information been shared to us as kids, we would have passed this information on to the future generation. And unfortunately, that has not happened because we, during our time, were forced to wear it, and it appeared almost like it was some kind of a superstition than any kind of a scientific reason to wear it. So this is something that bites me even now, that I wish people had told us, instead of saying it just keeps evil away, therefore please wear that little dot. So I make sure that I wear a bindi immaterial of where I'm going and what the occasion is. I remember going for the funeral of a very dear friend's mother-in-law. The lady in her living years never called me by my name Aroona and always would call me Bindiya. And she was absolutely in love with all my bindis, hence of course the Bindiya. So because of the somber occasion that it was, I went around with a tiny little bindi on my forehead. The daughter-in-law actually called me aside and she said, you know, my mother-in-law's soul, which is clearly hovering around here, will not recognize you today. So don't do this again. When you come for the remaining 3 days, please make sure you draw your big bindis. That for me was a huge lesson. Wherever across I go in the country, people seem to quite have a big smile on their forehead, at least when they see my bindi, but in one place. And I really, really don't know why, but people in Gujarat have a strange reaction when they see me. So they huddle together like I'm some kind of an apparition that's come out of another planet entirely, or they'll suddenly nudge each other and, you know, in groups, and suddenly there's a group of about 4 or 5 that'll form, and they'll walk in front of me looking like that and trying to figure out what to do with me. I've even had a man who walked into a pillar staring at me with his jaw that had reached the knee. Yes, I've had these kind of reactions. But what I normally do is I've reached that state, a Zen state, and I happily wave like a diva the minute I see somebody, you know, coming together in groups, and because I know what's going to follow right after. But wherever I travel the world over, be it New York or London or anywhere else in between, my forehead has been admired for the work that is on it, and therefore I get all the credit for it. I remember in New York in the subway, I was once asked if I was the one who had designed the funky bindis on Madonna, Katy Perry, Ashley Judd. And while the smile on my face kept getting bigger and they believed it was indeed me, I had to burst their bubble and say, not yet, but hopefully soon. That in fact is one of my dreams. I do hope that 1 million women across the world sport my designs, not just for the aesthetic reasons, but for the scientific ones as well. I never ever truly thought that one small little dot would make such a huge difference in my life. One of the worst periods that we went through was after we made our first film and it bombed and we lost everything that we had. And I remember locking myself up in our room. I didn't even, in fact, it chokes me even now when I think about it. I didn't step out of our room for days. I would mope around. Nobody could even talk to me because I didn't want to talk to anybody. And one fine day, a couple of days later, after this entire moping period was going on, I didn't have a choice, but we had to get ready to meet with the lawyers. And I pushed myself out of bed, forced myself out, went and had that shower rather reluctantly, stood in front of a mirror and drew that design on my forehead. And I cannot even begin to tell you how at that moment I felt transformed. Not just physically, but mentally as well. I felt absolutely charged from head to toe as I was applying the bindi on my forehead. Be it my tryst with cancer, or the extreme amounts of adenomyotic pain that I go through month after month after month to this day, I do believe it is my bindi, therefore my Ajna Chakra, that gives me the courage and the strength to carry on despite all the pain and despite all the odds. Thank you. I never really step out of home now. That one incident taught me so much. I never, ever, ever, ever step out of home without a design on my forehead. Sometimes it's an expression of what's going on inside my head, like in this picture where I've drawn the circle of life, or I've drawn the Mother Earth because I felt the urge to do it. I wear a bindi material of what I'm wearing, be it a sari or be it a funky nose pin, so I want to compete with the size of that one. Out on a date with the Chief Happiness Officer of McDonald's, Ronald McDonald's, there I am with him. On the beach, amidst flowers, wearing white, chatting up a little puppy. Out in the sea, and I've lifted designs straight out of my kurta onto my forehead. Matching my turquoise neck piece, and I had a turquoise bindi, I think, which is quite clear on that one. And whether I'm posing with birds, I have a little bit of this little puppy on my forehead, I'm sure. I think you all will see the resemblance here. And I do believe that there was a yantra there on the forehead. So whether it is on the beach that I am on, whether it's me in the rain, or whether it's me with a crutch, which is what happened last year, I am always seen with a bindi, never ever without one. It gives me a lot of joy when people walk up to me and say, please will you draw a bindi on my forehead as well? So I've happily done that to anybody who walks up to me. And this was a lady I didn't even know who walked up and said, please, can you draw something on my forehead? And she wanted one on the side and not in the center. And with other people, with the group of women I'd met for the first time. This was in Washington, again with a group of women I'd met for the first time. And guess what? I draw bindis for men too. It isn't just women that it's restricted to. So, of course, we call men's bindis slightly differently. We call them tilak. We don't want to give them the girly twang of a bindi. This was on Kali Chaudas about 2 years ago when a group of men, all my husband's friends, decided they wanted a bindi on the forehead. And that's someone from my office and somebody, a doctor that I met at a wedding. And some join in rather reluctantly, as you can see, the look here. I clearly seem to have, charged his ajna into shock mode. Couldn't get a reaction out of him. So when I set up my web portal, the Bindi web portal, techies, Indian techies online, on Twitter in fact, made a lot of fun of me. They said the meanest of things, and they said, who's going to fund this app? And they said, what next? A buy app? And all these techies in their little stints at Silicon Valley has totally forgotten the essence of being Indian. Kids, on the other hand, are absolutely open, and they love the idea of having bindis on their forehead. They walk up to me, ask me with interest, what is it? And if they can sport one too, as in the case of these little kids. And little boys as well, so those are bindis for little boys. Gives me great pleasure, in fact, to draw bindis for them. And me as a little kid who's clearly been inspired with what I sport on my own forehead. So she stuck a whole lot of her mother's 10 packets of stickers on her own forehead. Very sweet. And this is one of my favorite drawings of myself, done by two tiny little kids, Kamlakshi and Katyayani, who wanted to draw my face and don't miss the fact that they have drawn me with my bindi on. Each one of us has it in us to find the extraordinary. Unfortunately, it is family, it is society, and the policing that they do that stop us from thinking big and thinking out of ordinary and therefore being extraordinary. In the process of me finding my extraordinary, I even discovered the power of my bindi and therefore towards my ajna. I'd like to end with this beautiful quote. That small dot on her forehead, just like the third eye of Sati, seeing it all yet kept closed and calm, elegant and graceful as she already was, the bindi made her a heavenly goddess. Who imagined what a change a dot could make? I am waiting to draw a bindi on a lady volunteer, so I'm looking forward to. That looked easy, didn't it? I'm waiting for all of you to send me pictures soon with designs on your foreheads. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.